So, Evergrande finally collapsed, or have they really? So just in on Wednesday, the 8th of December, Evergrande's share actually hit a record low after a missed debt payment deadline put the developers at risk of becoming the country's largest defaulter. So this entire evolution of this Evergrande debacle have very much been broadly contained. And for those of you who have been tuning in to such news, have also noticed that the policymakers have become very vocal in addressing some of the inherent fears felt by the markets by and large. So consequences of the troubles linked to Evergrande are probably less likely to be felt by the layman. Interestingly, some might have thought that it would shake up the entire Chinese equities market again upon the confirmation of this default. But most of them have held relatively stable at their already low levels. So nothing to be really proud of, because it seems like the market have already attempted to price the collapse of Evergrande beforehand at this price range. So delisting was definitely more exciting than Evergrande. You know what's more exciting? You smashing the like button, of course. So better make sure you do it to feel the excitement too. Also, Moomoo is running a Christmas activity until the 31st of December 2021. So where you get a free Apple share and $40 of cash coupon when you make your first deposit amounting to around 2,700 Sing dollars or equivalent. So you can also stand a chance to win an iPhone 13, an AirPods 3 and many more during the limited time rewards promotion. So you can use my referral link down below in the description, and you will also get 180 days of unlimited commission-free trades and real-time market data. So for my non-Singapore-based viewers, you can use the other link to get free shares as well. Anyway, on the 4th of December, just a week earlier, Xinhua.net, which is one of the state-controlled media, reiterated that the Chinese regulators say Evergrande's default is an individual case where the impact was largely controllable. So they claim that the Evergrande's problem was mainly caused by its own management and of course the breakneck expansion, and the risk caused by a certain individual real estate firm in the short term will not undermine the fundraising function of the market for the medium and long term. So currently today, the Guangdong government and other relevant local governments and agencies are also guiding and urging Evergrande Group and its affiliates to resolve the risk steadily and orderly in accordance with laws and regulations, and to proactively resume and complete housing constructions for deliveries to the respective buyers of Evergrande Group. So it's one thing to listen to the government because we know that most of them have their own agendas, and this continuous erosion of trust in institutions are not doing them any form of good. It's another thing as investors when we see defaults one after another and still trying to convince yourselves that hey, everything is under control, CCP has it under control. So Fitch Ratings actually confirmed on 9th of December that Evergrande had defaulted on more than $1.2 billion worth of US bond, after failing which to make the 2 coupon payments due last month, accounting to around 82.5 million US dollars. So Fitch Rating actually cut Evergrande's status to a restricted default rating, and they define this rating as the company experiencing a default or essentially a distressed debt exchange, but has not begun winding up processes such as their bankruptcy filing and still remain in operations. So Fitch also applied the same default label to Kaisa Group Holdings, which failed to repay a $400 million bond. So together, the two companies actually accounted for about 15% of the outstanding dollar bonds sold by Chinese developers specifically. So exactly how long are we keeping to this story that everything is under control? When are we going to retire this term and start being frank about what is happening? So I understand that there is a distrust amongst investors and they are currently at an all-time high because we were constantly being fed the narrative that hey, the government knows exactly what they're dealing with all the data and all the statistics. And when cracks start showing, they stuck to their story and continue on with the show and the music. First, they retire the word transitory. Next, they might even start retiring themselves. Who can we even trust in today's world? So exactly what would the fate of Evergrande be moving forward? Will they be too big to fail? Or will the Chinese government make an example out of them? So your guess is probably as good as mine. But I would just like to provide you with some of my bold speculations and make some sense of the current development based on my own understanding of what exactly is happening in China today. First, let's talk about the idea of a restricted default rating. Are China companies above the law now? If they don't have the ability to meet their obligations, Are they not supposed to come clean and start their winding up process? Apparently, the downgrades to a so-called restricted default status come even though Evergrande and Kaiser have not officially announced default that could result in a drawn-out debt restriction processes. This feels exactly like Lehman in 2008, where they were trying their best to secure funding from anyone and anywhere, and the clock is consistently ticking away. To put it into perspective, it's definitely going to be an extremely messy affair when you're dealing with such a massive company with such a huge influence and, more importantly, importance in the entire financial system. Now, let's also not forget that not too long ago, the regulators actually dispatched a team of accounting and legal experts to examine the finances of Evergrande Group, which is also a potential precursor of restructuring the entire business back in September. So they also summoned Evergrande's executive for a meeting with the People's Bank of China and the China's Banking Commission. So Chinese authorities have also urged and told Evergrande's billionaire founder to use his own money to pay down the company's $300 billion debt. So even though I know that many of you would say that his net worth is only 7 odd billion, it wouldn't even be material in paying down the $300 billion debt. That's not the main point, people. It's the message being sent across to all the different entrepreneurs in China. You don't get away scot-free by screwing around with the Chinese economy and, more importantly, by screwing around with the Chinese people. Not the property market, not mortgage-backed securities. You don't get fat checks and fat bonuses after a financial crisis or a crisis of any sort. Not going to name names though, but I'm sure many of you who are experienced in the financial market knows exactly what I'm trying to drive at. Now, the founder is said to have used around 1.1 billion of his own money to pay down companies' debt thus far. So I would make a speculation that he will continue depleting into his own private wealth to feed this fire. Making a dent or impact aside, it's minimally the responsible thing to do, and there is at least some sort of accountability to the Chinese people by and large. Anyhow, the Chinese government has remained largely silent to this Evergrande development before sending in the team of experts to understand the inner workings of the company specifically. So I would venture a guess that many of these subsequent commentaries provided by the regulators or even the high officials, including the one stating that the impact is manageable, was contingent on the advice of the team of experts that they just sent in not long ago. So I wouldn't even be surprised if the authorities have already devised a plan to de-escalate this entire issue and to solve this so-called property crisis. Let's not forget, China is a country that loves control and loves planning for the future, for the party, for the people. It's also because of their lack of free elections. The legitimacy of the government relies heavily on the government's work on how prosperous the country becomes in the government term. So for those of you who still think that China will ignore the ramifications of this development, I would largely disagree. That said, will they jump straight to Evergrande's rescue? I doubt so too. So I think most of us can largely agree on the Chinese government's perspective of playing a parental role to the business environment. So they set the rules of the house, and the kids, which are the different businesses, will play within the perimeter. So when the companies get out of hand, a spanking or two will probably do the job. When they fall, it pains the parent, but being a typical Asian parent, they'll first scold you for being careless before administering the necessary aid or medication to ensure that you learn your lesson in future. So in this regard, I would suspect that even if they do not wish to save Evergrande, the founder will definitely have to pay the price with his own wealth. So they probably already have a restructuring plan in place to combat the 1001 problems from this crisis, and would most probably allow Evergrande to fall gracefully. So some of you might be curious as to what I mean by falling gracefully. It will essentially be a very methodical approach and a very well thought out process where a breaking up might be involved, and maybe down to the details of who buying up which part of this entire mess. Let's not forget, we always like to think that the Chinese government have full control, right? So in good times, they have full control. In bad times, they suddenly lost all their control. Let's at least see through the same story. So at the end of the annual Central Economic Work Conference, Chinese leaders also said that ensuring stability is a top priority for the economy next year, and the government will keep to a growth at a reasonable range for 2022, amongst the backdrop of whatever is happening in China today. So there is this constant reiteration from top officials about this idea and concept of stability. I don't think it's that hard to guess why they're so obsessed with this word. Like how on the other side of the globe, there was this obsession with the term transitory as well. Whether the Chinese government have the ability to keep to their word or not will depend on the upcoming quarters. So as of now, the equities market have attempted to price in the collapse of Evergrande and their implications. Of course, there might be unknown unknowns arising from the crisis, which would probably cause a second or even a third sell-off due to this different unknown news. But it seems like just from last week alone, delisting was the protagonist, while Evergrande was just a calafare. With that, do leave in the comment section down below how you think this entire Evergrande debacle will transpire. I'll see you in the next video, but more importantly, I'll see you on the moon. Goodbye!